Hey everyone, it's Caleb with the Antique Book Collective again, and today I'm bringing to you guys a new video. This video is what makes more money, antique books or new books? So right off the bat, as I always like to do, I'm going to tell you the answer. The answer is antique books, in my experience. Now, of course, there are new books that make more money, and there are antique books that make less money, but by and large, I have found that I make a whole lot more money with antique books. There are a lot of reasons with that, so I'm just going to dive right on in. So, first off, let me just outline the difference between antique books and new books. For me, I don't just do antique books as my whole antique book business. I also sell like vintage books. Sometimes I sell textbooks and newer books as well, but I really focus on books that are at least from before the 70s. The 60s is as late as I try to go generally. But I do sell books that are newer than that, of course. And as I've said in previous videos, my sweet spot is maybe the 40s, 1940s, and earlier. I really love finding books from the 1800s because when I sell books from the 1800s, I have found that I can't sell them for less than like 20 bucks at a very minimum. And for that, there's a lot of reasons. One of them I'd say is just because there are so few of them now because over 100 years have passed. In some cases, over 200 years have passed. So there's not many of them left. There's just that history to it. So there's that whole sort of thing. And for me, newer books are all the books that are newer than the 70s. And these books generally have something called an ISBN number. Let's see if I can... Sorry for the noise. So ISBN numbers, it's just that little barcode on the bottom. So yeah, that's a good indicator of what's a new book or an old book. So that's just something I like to base things off of. So let's just go through some rough ideas, some rough case studies on what I'm looking at. So for example, I have a couple books right here. So the first one is The Invisible Poet by T.S. Eliot. This is what I would call a newer book. And as you can see, it's a paperback book. So that's a good indicator of a book being newer in general. But let's just look at the year really quick. Opening up. Let's see. Here's the copyright page. It says it's 1959, so it's not really a new book, but it is newer than what I like to do, which, as I said, I like to do the 40s or older. So because this is a newer book, it's a paperback, all that sort of stuff, I bought it for $2, and at the maximum, I think I might be able to sell it for $12. And some of you, I'm sure, are thinking, well, that's a good return on your money, isn't it? I mean, $2 to $12, that's a 6 times multiple. I'm sure you have expenses, so let's just go through expenses really quick. I have to buy a box. A box is, let's just say, $1. I have to have the paper that I wrap it in because I like to do that. It's a little classier. So that's another 5 cents, let's say. Then I have to do postage. Buyer pays postage, so that's not actually an expense for me. Then I do storage. It doesn't take much space, so let's just say 5 cents. So, I mean, that's not much expenses. That's still good money, right? And that's where I have to disagree. My disagreement comes because there is an expense to my time. I had to go buy this book, which takes gas. I had to list the book. I had to take pictures. I had to do all these things. And for that reason, I actually haven't listed that book yet. In fact, I have only taken a picture, taken a price for it, because that's what I do with most of my books is I write down on sticky notes what price I think I could get for each book, how much I paid, that sort of stuff. Where I got it from is something I find really important to do, and if you guys are starting out, I really recommend that. But yeah, there's that sort of stuff. It's like, it's not really worth my time for $12 because there are so many better books for me to get. So just another random book, like literally I just grabbed random books out of my piles. So here's a older book. As you can see, it's a hardcover book, so there is more value to hardcover books, but additionally, hardcover books are generally the older books. Older books are either hardcover wrapped in paper is the newer hardcover books, but there are also hardcover books that are wrapped in leather. There are several different ways they do that. Some of them are like literally like floppy leather covers, which I think are just so beautiful and so cool. Others, it's a hardcover book, but it has leather on it. Others, still, there are hardcovers, but it's wrapped in cloth, which I think also looks pretty cool. And that's what the most expensive book I've sold to date was. It was actually a hardcover wrapped in cloth. It was the Time Machine, first edition. Love that thing. But yeah, that's generally what you'll find for the older books. Again, the newer, older ones have the paper wrapping on the hardcovers, but Still, it's not a game changer, not a deal breaker, that sort of stuff. So let's just find the date of this one. So this one, as you can see, is 1953. So it's a couple years older than The Invisible Poet, which I just showed you guys. But I could sell it for $28. And again, I would say this goes down to it being a hardcover book. I would say it goes down to it being a little bit older, and that sort of stuff. Additionally, there's just random things about the difference between books because of authors, because of the popularity of books, that sort of stuff. I don't really know the exact reasons for why so much of this happens, mostly because I haven't studied it enough, probably. But in my years of experience in this business, I've just found that the older books do a whole lot better. In 1953, I mean, that is pretty close to the 1940s, which is what I try to have as my main cutoff, but isn't my always main cutoff. Of course, I do make exceptions. Sorry for the noise right there. But there's all of that. Now, what are the reasons for why I like to do older books instead of newer books? So there's a lot of them. One of them is, again, the whole price difference thing. As I outlined just a little bit ago, there's the whole thing of just a few years and it is so much difference of a price. Of course, there's a lot of other variables there, but there's that. But a big reason for why I do it is competition. And it's not so much competition on the internet, because I'm fine with other people selling the same books as me. It actually helps me out because it helps me get an idea of what I can charge for my book. Additionally, there's the entire thing of competition helping me is if I can find a book, then there's a lot of other versions of it on, say, eBay, which is where I do all my selling. If there's a lot of that book on eBay already, that means readers are going to go there no matter what, and they're going to shop around for this specific book. More books means more competition, which is bad, but it also means more viewers, more eyes on the books, which means more sales. So that's the whole ebb and flow, and that's actually one of the reasons why I'm sharing all of the information on how to do this business is I'm trying to make eBay a better place to buy antique books. I'm trying to get more antique booksellers on it to help everyone out, basically, and to make it so all the book buyers out there know that they can go on eBay to find the books. Down the road, I think it'd be cool if we made a website to sell antique books, but for now, it's just eBay. So another thing about competition, though, which is my issue for why I do antique books and older books instead of the brand new books like the dictionary I just had, the whole ISBN number thing, is because with competition, there are already a lot of other booksellers out there. And these booksellers, most of them, I would actually say like 90% of the ones that I encounter are something that people in the industry call scanners. So Friends of the Library sales, if you check them out, they might have a rule that says no scanners allowed Friday or no scanners allowed at all. And that is referring to people that go and scan the ISBN numbers. And people that sell books off of the ISBN numbers, which again is just the little barcode, those people, they come in the droves. I actually used to be one of them. I like to think that I was a lot kinder than the other ones because there have been a lot of mean ones. But there's lots of them. There are literally hundreds. I went to some estate sales and mostly Friends of the Library sales. And literally there are just people all lined up going through all the books, one after another. And the person that gets there first gets all the really good books generally. They do miss some every now and then, but they get most of the good books, which means everyone else is stuck with basically the scraps. And for me, I would go to some of these Friends of the Library sales and whatnot and see all the other scanners there, and I'd be like, oh, there's not going to be very much left for me. And that was because of my experiences. I had already seen that. And of course, if you're a scanner, that is not saying that you can't still make money. So for me, I would see all the other scanners in these other areas. Generally, a lot of them would go to the fiction categories or another category or one or another. So I eventually found that for me, my place that I'd go to very first, because no one else was ever there basically, was I'd go to the religious nonfiction stuff, and I would go through, scan all those things really quick, and I'd make a whole lot of money on that. And in fact, I still sell a lot of those religious nonfiction books that are newer, just because that's sort of a niche that I have that has done very well for me, and because I like that sort of stuff. So there's that whole thing about competition. So it's not that you're finding other sellers to compete with on the internet, which is a thing and is a problem, especially if you're doing scanner books, of when you do these, there are thousands of other people. So, I mean, this book right here might be able to sell for $1, and if you bought it for $1, that's basically a loss because you have other expenses. But for antique books, I have literally gone to so many estate sales and so many friends of the library sales and so much of all this stuff, and there's no one else buying antique books. Like, no one at all. And at Goodwill Outlet, I would say that's the only place that I've actually encountered other people that are selling either vintage or even antique stuff. Generally, they only are selling more vintage things, and that's the mass market paperbacks that I've mentioned before. That's the older Bibles that I've mentioned before, that sort of thing. So no one that I have found is actually selling antique books that are just broadly antique books. And for you guys that are always thinking, oh, I have to niche down, there's no business if I can't niche down. Antique books, that's actually a pretty solid niche. I mean, that's pretty far down there. So let me just say a couple things really quick on how I spot antique books. So when I go onto the websites and if they have any pictures, first thing I look for, as I've said before, is I look for books that are like those nice dark blues, hardcover dark blues. Usually I look for things that are like sort of look sun bleached, because when they're sun bleached and they're darker blues or grays or blacks or tans, any of those colors, and if they're hardcovers and if they look sun bleached, that's a good indicator that they're probably pretty old. Another thing that I look for when I'm at the actual estate sale is, I don't know if this is really going to come through quite right, but there is a color difference between the older and newer books. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is they actually changed how they did their papers, like the paper they actually did the books with through the years. And we've gotten to whiter and whiter color books. Let me just grab another book really quick. Sorry. That might be a better indication for the color difference. So nowadays, all the pages are white, and there are several reasons for that. First one is, obviously, pages color, and they turn yellow with age, they turn brown with age. But on top of that, books back in the day, these older ones, their paper actually didn't start out this white to begin with, believe it or not. So that is something that I like to look for, is the darker color pages when I'm going through an estate sale or a friend's library sale. And a lot of times they'll stack the books so all you can see is the tops or the sides or stuff like that. And that's a good indicator of how to find the older books, which I think is pretty cool. So there's a lot of stuff for all of that. I'm just not going to dive in too deep. So let me just move on to the next part. So next part is, why do I personally think that antique books sell better, make more money than new books? So for me, my experience is the antique books, there are a whole lot less sellers for them, and there's also a lot less buyers, which isn't a good thing, but it means that you can demand higher premiums. So it's sort of like the whole iPhone versus $20 flip phone argument, you know? Like, you have the iPhone and it's $1,000, or you have the $20 flip phone. You'll sell a whole lot of the $20 ones, but you're not going to make a whole lot of money per unit. Whereas the iPhone, I mean, they can make $500 and no one's going to know. So that's the sort of thing here, is you're not going to get the same sales volume as you're going to get with brand new books if you're selling antique books. But the other side of that, the flip side of that, is you're going to sell them for so much more money that it's not really going to matter. And from my experience, I have actually made a whole lot more money with the antique books than I did with the new books, the newer books. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One of them is because I did Amazon FBA, which I'll do another video on in the future, but I did Amazon FBA for my newer books, which means I just sent them all to Amazon and Amazon would ship them out, but they also charged a lot of fees for that. Whereas the antique books I do through eBay, and I get like a tiny bit of an eBay fee here and there and there, and eBay actually gives you free listings to a certain amount depending on your account age. So that's another thing that I was able to get a lot more money on, is I was getting free listings for my books, so I was getting even lower overhead on just selling books. So all that's really cool stuff, and that's basically where all my profits came from, is just the differences of Amazon fees versus eBay fees. Is Amazon, they took, say, 80%, whereas eBay is taking less than 10% in general for me. So yeah, there's that whole thing. So why do I think there's a value difference, though, between the books, like just in general? It's because older books, they actually cost a lot more money to make back in the day. So nowadays you have books, and back to the dictionary really quick, and if you look really close on any new book that you grab off your shelf, basically, it's going to be probably paperback. Your hardcovers are a little different, and that's why they cost more, is because they actually are harder to make and cost more to make. But your paperbacks nowadays, most of them are made with something called perfect bind, which is when you see just a little line of glue basically on the spine, that sort of stuff. And it's really cheap to make, but it's not always the best book. I haven't had a whole lot of issue with perfect bind stuff, but there's the whole thing of books cost a lot more to make back in the day than they do now. So that's sort of one of the reasons why the prices are so different. Another thing is antique books, there's a whole lot less because people throw away books after they read them sometimes. They get destroyed with age, that sort of stuff. So there's less antique books. And for some of these books, these are the only books left of that entire book, you know? Like, you might be holding the very last copy of a certain book, and because of that, you can demand a lot higher of a price. And sometimes, for me, I hop on eBay to sell some books, and the only way you can buy some of these books is to buy a PDF version of someone that had a book and scanned the whole thing, made a whole file of it on a PDF, and that's the only way you can buy it. And I'm holding here like a hard copy version of this 150-year-old book. So there's that whole thing as well of you could be holding the very last one of these books, and that's why the price is so much higher. Whereas a new book, if someone wants this book, this dictionary, they can go and buy 1,000 new ones, and they could go print them that very day. For me, I'm an author, and I don't buy all of my books and sell them. Amazon actually prints my books for me, for free technically to me, but yeah, they just print them on demand, and you can't do that with antique books. Antique books are there, and there's less and less of them as time goes on, whereas print-on-demand books, all the new books nowadays, there's more and more with every day that passes. So that's the whole thing with value as well, is old ones are just going to gain in value, while new ones are probably just going to keep on going down in value because more and more are getting out there. And finally, let's just answer the question of how did I even find the antique book business? Like, that sounds like a really random niche to just figure out, right? So for me, I've actually, like, it's a really fun story. It's basically been something I've always been interested in, is antique books. So when I went to my first Friends of the Library sales, I saw all the other scanners, and I'd hop in, I'd start scanning the books too, trying to get through everything faster than them so I could get more books out. Hopefully find some more books than them, because if I don't go fast enough, they're going to get all the books before me. And sometimes I'd be eyeing all the antique books in the corner, and no one, like literally no one goes to these corners where they have the antique books, and I'm eyeing them, and I'm like, I know for a fact these things have value, why aren't people going to those? And I'd continue scanning, I'd finish scanning all the books in the entire library, and then I'd be like, well, no one else has gone to this quiet corner, let me go. And I'd pull up my eBay app and be checking all the comps for all these different books, and I'm like, oh wow, I can make $500 here, $100 here, $30 here, and I'd get a whole stack of books, and this stack of books of antiques is worth $1,000, whereas 5 stacks of new books this big is only worth the same. And it's like, oh wow, I paid so much more money for these new books than I am for these antique books, but I'm making so much more money here on the antiques. So there's that whole sort of thing going on that side of things, is you make a whole lot more money per unit. And that's sort of where I started having my eyes open to it, is, well, maybe I should just do the antiques and forget the new books. And I kept doing that, and then sometimes I go to these Friends of the Library sales, the garage sales, all that sort of stuff, and everyone's already scanning the books. And sometimes there's too many other scanners, and I'm like, well, I can't butt my way into that. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm sort of getting forced out of that market. So I'd go straight to the antique book pile and grab all my books, and then I'd leave, basically. And because I changed how I did that, I could do it in so much less time because I didn't have to scan all these books. And as time went on, I mean, I just could not make the same amount of money in the new books as I could my antique books. So I just phased out of that. I would say I was only in the newer book business for a little over a year before I finally was like, all right, wiping my hands clean of this, I'm done with this. So I actually closed down my FBA store for Amazon. I closed it all down, got rid of all the newer books that I had there, and I've been focusing exclusively on the antique books and on the other books I sell on eBay since then, and I've made so much more money per unit, and it's so much less effort, believe it or not. Like FBA, the whole draw of that is, oh yeah, you don't have to ship out the books yourself, la-di-da-di-da. But there's a lot of actual like maintenance stuff that you have to do. It's actually pretty tedious once you have tens of thousands of books on it. And the entire thing just, it wasn't doing it for me. I'm like, FBA, I'm sorry, you're done to me. You're dead to me. forget you, I'm doing just eBay. I don't care if I have to ship out the books. I mean, I'm shipping out 5 books a week and I'm making the same amount of money as if I sold 100 with FBA. So it's like, whatever. So that is just something that I'd really like to point out is it's something that I just found in the course of business is I can make so much more money doing it. And that's why I'm trying to sell you guys on the whole antique book business idea instead of the FBA idea, is because there's more money to be had and there's less work to be had as well. And honestly, it's a lot more rewarding. And as I've said in all my other videos, if you're not going to save these antique books, if you're not going to buy them, they're going to go to the dumpster, they're going to get recycled, they're going to be destroyed. And that's history being destroyed. That's like, there are signed first edition copies of books that are 150 years old that are being destroyed. And it's like, no, you can't do that. It's heartbreaking to think that that sort of stuff's happening. So long story short, antique books make so much more money than new books, in my experience, per unit, all that sort of thing. And you can oftentimes pay a whole lot less money for them as well because people just want to get rid of them because it's an old book. Who cares about an old book? It smells. And yeah, there's a whole lot more money to be had than you might think. So I hope that really helps you guys, and I hope that you guys can help me buy up all the old books you can, buy all the antique books you can, and save them from going to the dump, because if you don't, that's where they're going. See you guys on the next video.